Itachi Uchiha, having dedicated his entire life to Konoha, surpassing all of his peers, including both the Uchiha clan and S-rank Akatsuki members, has always been a character of discussion against the very similar 4th Hokage, who dominated the entire Third Great Ninja War, developing a run-on-site order for literal nations. So let's not yap, everyone has discussed this topic, so once and for all, with every argument on the table, who is truly the, dare I say, clear winner? Also subscribe if you enjoy, shooting for 20k, let's go. Firstly, it's important to establish a ground for the two and the tier at which they can be compared, as Minato was, even prior to ever becoming Hokage, a shinobi whose achievements began 27 years ago with the prevention of a literal Jinchuriki kidnapping, which was such a notable success that even the runner-up Raikage A, who was already deemed the strongest man in Kumogakure, instantly recognized Minato's valor through that alone, which likely coupled with him leading Konoha camps to victory too many times to count, giving him the notorious run-on-site order from Iwagakure, which the birthday columns imply might not have been exclusively Iwagakure. And while Itachi was never ordinary by any means, he was a shinobi capable of convincing the same heavy Sasuke who killed Deidara, a 2-time solo Jinchuriki and Biju capture, to such a level that Itachi, even whilst upping the dosage of his medicine according to the Sasuke Jinraiden novel, prompting that searing pain to the lungs, causing those bloody coughs, where he was also almost completely blind in that scene, yet still capable of weaving hand signs beyond what Sasuke could even perceive. Once again, someone who could beat Akatsuki members who would be recognized as each being capable of taking down 1,000 men at once. And this Deidara even recognized Itachi as a man and fighter far superior to himself, that he would need to spend years honing his ability to sway the tides of how such a battle would go. So it's likely not an exaggeration to make the case that Itachi could have done everything Minato did in the Third War, including outpacing the unruly A's top speed, which is consistent with how later into the series we would see that Sasuke would ultimately realize the depth beyond Itachi's illusory curtain, seeing how he truly never caught up to his brother even after obtaining the Mangekyo Sharingan, and running through each of the 5 Kage, called the strongest shinobi, back to back, having the hatred that burned from the embers of Itachi's suffering propel his chakra to new heights. And like in Naruto's parallel form, Sage Mode, the change in chakra quality gives a real boost in ninjutsu, genjutsu, and taijutsu, where he would eventually gain tier amps on top of his almost unrecognizable state, before he would then get the EMS to reach Itachi's beyond the Mangekyo level power. So, saying that Itachi is beyond any Kage Summit Sasuke, including the one who was stated to be a far cry from himself, at least in Genjutsu, should be consistent, along with the idea of him actually being able to dominate the 4th Raikage in a similar manner to how Minato once did all those years ago. And while yes, he was much younger, saying that Minato could dominate the 5 Kage overall should be consistent. The chapter 538 synopsis statement actually remarks that during that specific flashback, Minato, as Hokage, is faster than even the later Raikage A from the war arc. And I mean, standing at the top of Konoha, and more importantly the entire world, is essentially a presupposition of what it means to become Hokage, where he, having been praised as the greatest in godlike speed, would take up Hiruzen's mantle through him stepping down, despite him being politically loved by everyone in the village, according to the 1 Decade 100 Ninja Guide, showing how it was truly his monstrous and what the chapter 238 synopsis statement calls his unrivaled strength that led him to this position. And we know that this statement would also include a part 1 Itachi, or at least what's been revealed through Itachi thus far. As the second databook phrases it, he makes sport out of the strongest jonin like Kakashi, Asuma, and Kurenai, with just a glimpse of his enormous power, having weaved signs beyond Kakashi's perception and humiliating Kurenai in her own genjutsu before Kakashi states he hasn't even begun to show his true strength, implying that anything gained after his departure of the Anbu wasn't revealed here. So while yes, Minato would stand above this unrevealed Itachi, who in both the first and second databook has unrevealed stats like how Madara, Obito, and Minato do later, showing how the series probably isn't accounting for their power in some statements, at least in regards to these medians, like how Pain is called the strongest man in the Akatsuki, or called invincible, despite yielding to Obito and being called inferior to him in the following arc after that databook's conclusion. This statement should still be good support though for Minato being above Hiruzen, which isn't an understatement at all. He's quite literally stronger than almost every Kage in history at the time, if you've watched my Hiruzen video, as he literally is also capable, even whilst much older, of fighting 3 characters capable of beating any of the 5 Kage, still whilst mentally crippled by almost a tier level. Whilst old, where he was still confident that even though he might not be able to beat Orochimaru and threats like this, if Minato were still around, he certainly could have dismantled these threats, like how he literally cracked space and time itself to deflect the Bijou bombs, ordering Hiruzen to take on the Nine Tails until he can get there after battling the aforementioned true strongest man in the Akatsuki, Obito, who even at 17 to 18 years old could react to and combat Minato, being able to actually grab his arm and nearly transport him away. And while this isn't the silver bullet that fans think it is, it does still demonstrate a low-end relativity if you're being generous, but it also could be moot for both parties. You see, Obito is sneaking up on Minato, who then swings around at what could possibly be full speed if you're generous, and the moment he passes through Obito, he reacts to it, and then likely would have also altered his physical choice as well, seeing as it makes no sense to continually swing at full speed and do a 360, where Obito then catches his arm, and it shows Minato trembling when Obito wasn't. Although Obito was in a mechanically more advantageous position here, having a greater torque value. Torque is the rotational equivalent of force and is calculated as torque equals force times distance from joint. And when a limb is closer to the joint, the shorter lever arm, the torque required to move or stabilize that is technically less, meaning that ultimately it's more stable and your nervous system can recruit more muscle fibers efficiently. It's essentially why holding a dumbbell or weight further away from your chest makes it appear to be heavier. And while this seems very rudimentary, you'd be surprised. So while this could be a feat for Obito, Minato can still physically stop the leftover Nine Tails via planting his feet, and we see that in terms of speed, it's really ambiguous. He can still raise his entire other arm and weave a tiger sign and then potentially another unknown sign in the time at which it takes Obito to try to transport him away. The battle then relocates, and after analyzing the Kamui, he realizes that he needs to time an attack, runs through him, then does it again, convincing Obito of his supposed top speed, where then he just completely blitzes him with the Flying Raijin, winning the battle of speed, even though he was holding back in the Flying Raijin subspace through having to turn his entire body into the other direction. But that's neither here nor there. It's kind of just supports him holding back the speed that he used to convince Obito, which the anime shows a little differently, having completely slamming the Rasengan after exiting the subspace, creating one of the hardest blitzes in the entire series. And while it may seem like just due to this performance, Minato would blitz around the lesser experienced Itachi due to his encounters with Obito, those probably play out in a manner that you might not recall as well, and might truly suggest some implicit rivalry between the two, as having been considered already for Anbu captain, with Danzo going so far to even lie about his age to guarantee such a position. Itachi at the age of just 12 years old is already considered to possess outstanding abilities even in comparison to the rest of the strongest clan in Konoha, who were such a military force that Konoha owes its peace to their ultimate effort, where his fireball, something that's considered by the 3rd anime profile guides and 2nd databook shinobi facts section, and even Fugaku, to be the pinnacle of determining the value of one representing the symbol who manipulates fire. The Uchiha clan crest can now be matched by only Shisui the Teleporter and the Wicked Eye Fugaku, each of the which are shinobi feared by other nations, with the latter in fact being a 4th Hokage candidate. So Itachi, despite his age, is quite a monster, as also expanded on prior, and it's quite telling for his rivalry with this much older Obito, and it's actually pretty consistent, at least when they encounter each other in the Uchiha basement, where Itachi is soon to be at not just the peak of the clan, but the village at large, wherein upon seeing Obito down there, Itachi engages him for the first time since Obito murdered his teammate Tenma 4 years ago, using Kamui to literally phase through him and mangle his child friend, where Obito now notes Itachi's growth, where Itachi also noticed how Obito has been using Kamui to weave around certain cameras, meaning that Itachi knows of this aspect of Kamui and the aforementioned phasing one, which was so terrifying that Itachi was paralyzed by the phenomenon of the Obito's body, and couldn't even move due to the pressure. where the two now escape to the moonlit path lined by cedar trees, as also portrayed in the manga. Then the narrator continues about how Itachi wouldn't allow Obito to take revenge, with him also following up with "I have conditions," cutting straight through Obito's attitude. "I'll help you get revenge on the Uchiha clan, and in exchange, you don't lay a hand on the village or Sasuke Uchiha." Obito by this point was unable to hide his shock at just how forceful Itachi is. A definition of forcefulness being physical energy or intensity, which is very consistent, as we'll discuss in a minute. Itachi's face devoid of all expressions. He then offered the answer to Obito's questioning, stating, "If you refuse this request, then you and I are enemies." And Obito just had to ask, "Could you kill me?" And Itachi rebutted with, "It's not a matter of if I can or not. I will kill you." Then the two shinobi each acknowledged each other as opponents, with no more bloodlust remaining in their auras. Keep that in mind. Which, while this scene has been analyzed many times in these videos, many things simply aren't examined enough. Them acknowledging each other as opponents with no more bloodlust remaining in their auras would imply that previously there was, which is pretty consistent with how Itachi forcefully cut through Obito's arrogant attitude, forcing him into this more serious state. Now, while some may question these auras and wonder if they are genuinely power correlated or not, or simply just signs of an ideological conflict between them, the answer should be really clear, especially once you sit it next to their original counter 4 years prior, which opens with Itachi being 7 or 8, and Obito here is kind of approaching his escort squad. He's acting goofy, then immediately shuts down the daimyo with a genjutsu that wiped out him, his close aides, and the 2 guardian shinobi of the 12. Yet Itachi, without his Sharingan and his genjutsu specialist teammate, resisted it. Obito would then go on to brutally murder Tenma, as I kind of alluded to prior, causing Itachi to be totally suppressed by Obito's wordless pressure. The narrator stating, perhaps his instincts, sensing the difference between his own abilities and those of that man, refused to let him fight, with him also alluding to how he was just trying to process the phenomenon of the man's body. Pay attention to that line. You see, previously, Itachi was so much weaker than Obito that he was reservedly overwhelmed by his pressure, something highlighted as a direct indication of power and if he can judge whether he can fight an opponent or not. This is also shown through numerous things in the series, like whether it be Fugaku's pressure to be sensed from the other room, the indescribable pressure of Danzo's words, Itachi's aura potentially suppressing the power of Kisame, the aura of Orochimaru's 8-headed Hydra, Sasuke sensing the aura of Zabuza and his caliber of shinobi, Guy recognizing Zabuza through his aura in the war arc, and you name it. Even in the manga, even much earlier, Hiruzen and Orochimaru, 2 shinobi stated by objective medians to be equal in both taijutsu and general combat, have a stare down of equal magnitude where their aura clashes and cracks the roof, showing how specifically correlated this can get. In every median, whether it be the Itachi Shinden novels, Gaara Hiden novels, Akatsuki Hiden novels, the manga, etc., this is power correlated. Yet when a few years have passed and years have been dedicated to the honing of his abilities, Itachi now can forcefully cut through that pressure that previously wouldn't allow him to fight, where now he can, forcing Obito to acknowledge him as an opponent while he did the same, with Itachi being confident and certainly killing Obito one way or another. See, while this encounter is short, it still needs a lot of attention to understand more about where Obito gains so much respect for Itachi, which has now been presented as kind of why Obito states, now that Itachi's dead, the Leaf Village is no longer off limits, kind of referencing his deep unwillingness to break this pact, a pact that if broken guaranteed his death by Itachi's hands, sort of implying that Obito may not even disagree with that possibility. Even the third data book mentions Obito's goal of Tsukiyomi and Itachi's death being of a similar priority, and as I mentioned in my video about the two, the most nuclear statement Obito makes about Itachi, adding to why he was weary of testing Itachi, would be him internally monologuing in his own head that, quote, if Itachi knew everything about me, I'd be dead, end quote. This basically confirming that via Obito's own admission, Itachi could kill him if he simply knew more about his abilities. How Itachi would actually do this, we don't know. However, you may be able to pinpoint this away from the Amaterasu if you consider their interaction in the Naruto Road to Ninja movie, and if you consider that canon, which is actually quite possible considering Kishimoto's name is in the credits and he actually drew a mini manga leading into it that is corroborated by many things for the Naruto manga box set number 3, showing how he held some respect to its canonicity, seeing as other mini guides are actually just parts of the first fan book that are included in other box sets like 1 and 2, which is actually canon. And Kishimoto also created an official manga canon guide itself to supplement the actual movie's release alongside volume 61 in 2012. If you are to accept it, there's a scene where Itachi threatens Obito, saving Sakura, and he states, "I take it physical attacks will be ineffective against one such as you. However, I have other cards up my sleeve." Obito then responds by stating, "If you put your mind to it, you could even set me on fire." This would immediately make you think Amaterasu due to the fire wording. However, when you consider that Amaterasu did mess Obito up, he still just countered it, and likely with Kamui, on the basis that he doesn't crack his mask like he does in every other instance. With the fact that physical attacks won't work and the Amaterasu is stated to be the strongest physical attack, you could probably rule that out and potentially even imply it's Tsukiyomi, as the emphasis is on his left eye, which houses the strongest genjutsu, something non-physical, which also is pretty interesting and may hold some validity with how he would counter Obito's basic genjutsu without a Sharingan, but it's also just a possibility still, only to be granted if you accept this movie as canon. Another way to look at it is that Naruto Road to Ninja is displayed as something further intertwined within the manga material, as in July 2012, Shonen Jump issue 34 came out featuring numerous Road to Ninja character designs by Kishimoto, including Naruto himself, Hinata, Minato, Kushina, and Sasuke as well, only a single day after the release of volume 61, which was coupled with that aforementioned secret volume for the Road to Ninja and that supplementary guide, which does have the same authorship style to all 4 databooks. This issue comes out connecting itself to the manga at chapter 594, with the next Shonen Jump cover actually being the other side of Naruto's face, detailing more of those designs, but the opposite character personality variations, I guess, which is kind of what I previously said about issue 34, which all takes place right around the really awkward time frame of Naruto, Kakashi, and my guy battling White Mask Obito, ultimately cracking his mask, which is shown on the Jump cover magazine, which supports where Kishimoto was at when drawing this alongside the manga. Therefore, the conclusion of this Jump magazine cover is 2 things. Firstly, it confirms that it is connected to the manga in some real sense, as also on the Naruto official website, we know most of these are considered canon, and there are many other statements, such as ones in the Pain arc and the Land of Waves. Secondly, it also confirms a nearly impossible specific time for when this might have taken place, although in that case there are alternative ways to suggest when this might have had to have taken place, which would be sometime after the opening of the 5 Kage summit, as that's the first mention of Obito's project Suki no Mi. So ultimately, the chronological timeline for this is really awkward. Naruto knows things he shouldn't know and doesn't know things he should know. So it's not impossible, and the conclusion I think you should draw from this is something along the lines of the manga material shown and drawn for the movie release is probably canon, considering all of not just Kishimoto's involvement, but Shueisha's involvement as well, whereas the anime movie and extra sources are a secondary canon, so long as nothing is contradictory, at least on a major level, as the movie kind of has a lot of weird alterations to small details, ranging from the pictures in the Hokage office being differently to entirely different people being alive, meaning that ultimately this anime scene should at least be something considered as a secondary canonical material and something preferred as authoritative by Kishimoto himself, and therefore Itachi should still be able to kill Obito through an ambiguous way, and it could be Tsukiyomi, and Obito does concede this a second time in this secondary material, fitting with the true argument for him being that he would be relative to the version of Obito who participated in the massacre, and like how Sasuke grew exponentially through the summit, even more than Sasuke, he grew exponentially through the massacre and would now have a much greater chance at beating this Obito, hence why Obito viewed Itachi as someone too risky to take chances with after his careless run-in with obviously Minato, leading us to one true conclusion, that Itachi at some point in his life should be able to at least rival Minato in some sense, perhaps in a similar way to how Obito rivaled him, where Minato is still the superior combatant, but Itachi can still fight. Now, is there other ways to suggest some external lore for Minato that might put him above even further on top of this that might go against this? Well, there has been a bit of fair talk about KCM2 Naruto and much more to come. So what is KCM2 Naruto? And just trust me, I know it sounds a little weird, but stick with me. As an explanation for this, a quick one, alright, a quick one will make this much easier. KCM2 Naruto is the fulfillment of Naruto having to work with the external chakra sources as though they are his own, as demonstrated through him having to place building blocks using strictly the manipulation of Kurama's chakra, which when manifested externally and used as an amplifier is much faster and stronger than Naruto himself. He is literally just shattering through boulders when trying to pinch the rocks, as that's the level he has to learn to control, one with even a completely unique, life-enhancing, yet sinister quality to it. However, this is because it's almost completely Kurama's chakra, where Kurama then takes in Naruto's chakra in exchange. Yet in KCM2, this changes and Kurama stops doing so and allows for Naruto to have the complete amalgamation of both worlds. He gets both pieces of the cake, harnessing the combined power to the max, using even what's shown to be a chakra construct of Kurama, who in his natural form is basically just that, a chakra construct. And since this all demonstrates that the more power and the faster things are, the stronger things are, it's correlated to chakra. Minato being able to dodge around and beat up the full Nine Tails is therefore actually really impressive in context, because one thing people don't know is that Minato didn't seal half of Kurama, or at least in the way you think. He sealed the leftover half into Naruto because he states that it would be impossible to seal the whole thing. He's not talking about his own sealing ability, as that would just have directly contradicted Kushina and other aspects and implications about his own sealing throughout other parts of the manga. It's just talking about what could go into an infant, and this leftover half diction is used by Dark Kurama himself, and yet even though this is nearly twice the speed of KCM2's avatar, which is obviously faster than the user like the Susanoo is, as I went into heavily in my last video, Minato can still leave signs without sweating. He's much faster than the Bijou Bomb, at least what that could travel, which is a blitz level beyond the bodily avatar, so Minato can react to and combat literal blitz levels above Kurama, and when accounting for if you pixel calc the Paul blitz, this fits very handily with anywhere between 1 to 7 times being how much faster Minato is than Kurama. He's also able to blitz all 4 Hokage to the battlefield, despite them being stated to be the strongest set of soldiers, meaning they're stronger than KCM2 Naruto. Hashirama can battle the same Madara, who is able to kind of fight this KCM2 Naruto, but you know what, you get the point. Even War Arc Kakashi, who can rival White Mask Obito and Taijutsu, was relative to base Minato in the War Arc, and this is actually a point for both he and Itachi's stamina. You see, Minato would be revived in the war with the larger than Naruto's Nine Tails cloak of additional chakra, although after constant fighting and mental affliction, he would then give so much chakra to Naruto, he couldn't even use the Flying Thunder God, a jutsu used 70 times if you count the kunai being thrown against the opposing Jonin platoon in the Third War. Minato then gives the rest of that chakra away, reverting him back to his base weakened Edo Tensei body that's now also permanently missing an arm, yet still he can fight at these top tier levels, and like Itachi's stamina is underrated, being able to low-key outlast Curse Mark Heavy Sasuke. It's simply not on this level. Although Itachi has more ways to pressure Minato than what you'd probably believe, as he does have fire style that's stated to be not even comparable to his ordinary fire style. He's a Amaterasu, hailed as the strongest physical attack, that he was also able to use multiple times against Sasuke. The number at which he does this is up for debate, but it's clearly 2 if you kind of pay attention to the eye's dilation, and you'll see how it functions when the chakra still is being allocated to the flow, showing how Itachi can unironically just spray a literal streak of Amaterasu to cover up any kunai on the ground, preventing Minato from teleporting, although it's kind of like fighting on like an ocean front, more or less. His more traditional attacks like the Phoenix Flower Jutsu probably could damage Minato, but likely wouldn't be that threatening, and any true chance of victory would have to come from the Susanoo, using not just the long-range Yasuka beads and armor, but the spirit weapons. In the third data book, these are renowned as godlike techniques that are only used by those who have achieved a mastery beyond the Mangekyo Sharingan, a jutsu feared by those around him as the most powerful of the ocular jutsu, which would entail that all of Pain's Rinnegan abilities shown prior to chapter 402, as that's the farthest at which this data book covers as hinted at earlier, would be inferior to Itachi's mythical spirit weapons. One thing that makes them unique is their lack of corporeal aspects, being more akin to an ethereal item. The Totsuka blade is stated to be a variant of the Kusanagi blade that is endowed with the power to plunge those it pierces into a world of drunken dreams. Get this, the blade itself is imbued with sealing ninjutsu, and in stark contrast, the Yatamir is stated to be a spirit weapon without a physical form, with the power to change every one of its properties, allowing for it to alter its attributes in accordance with the attributes of the oncoming attack, rendering that attack ineffective. The combination of these two forces the data book to state the Susanoo boasts an absolutely perfect attack and defense because of its spirit weapons wielded in each hand. The 10-handed sword that can cut down any enemy in its right, and the Yatamir, a shield that can repel any attack. In the face of a god's power, any attack, whether from a material or astral body, ninjutsu or physical, lose their meaning. Ultimately, Minato does still seem to be faster than Itachi at both their high ends and comes out looking more impressive against Obito through their explicit fight rather than Itachi's implicit narrative, yet the Susanoo might be what bridges the gap between the two, seeing as this chakra construct is going to be much faster than Itachi, although we know the Susanoo is what's stated to make Itachi invincible, whereas in comparison, Pain, and not just Tendo, is called invincible as just regular Pain multiple times, and even referred to as the Akatsuki's invincible leader. Even the notoriously strong members obey him for his charisma, and more notably, his power that no one can deny. And we know this applies to Itachi, seeing as he directly refers to Pain as his leader, and one whose orders must be followed. And due to Minato's not seeing Pain as a threat, but rather Obito, saying that Pain is extraordinarily below Obito, this might suggest a wider gap between the Obito comparisons and what this might do for that as a whole. Point being that many speed gaps in Naruto are generally overstated, and Itachi won't be perception blitzed by Minato and probably could still react to him on lower ends through ocular abilities. As an example of this in the series, take Sasuke versus A. A is much faster than Sasuke's bodily movement, yet through his faster techniques, he would have killed A through his ocular abilities and tactical acumen, both of which Itachi takes to a different tier, as does Minato with A, but still, this is probably just how the two would ultimately interact, and as the largest Minato advocator, I would still have to say that otherwise, it's pretty disingenuous to say that Itachi, even coming out of the massacre, likely couldn't beat the earlier forms of Minato, fitting with either his ability to clear the Forest of Death faster than Minato whilst alone, despite placing second behind Minato in the written exams. And while you may be quick to point out the possibility of Minato not being able to get around it, he should still be able to seal it. However, what does sealing do in a battle like this one where the spirit weapons are involved? Well, what if I told you it wouldn't matter, seeing as their ethereal property would negate the sealing ninjutsu? Let me explain. Minato's sealing and basically all sealing ninjutsu doesn't require a physical medium to operate, as we know that Obito's Kamui is ontologically passive and his immaterial form is his standardized preset, and he has to consciously force the materialization. The kanji for this during the Konan fight directly refers to a process by which abstract concepts or ideas become manifested in reality, yet Minato's sealing ninjutsu in both the FTG and separation seal, and he uses that to plant on Obito's body his abstract, immaterial concept of a body, meaning that on the basis that it can interact with things like this, the Totsuka blade has in the medium at which it has its own very own sealing ninjutsu that's imbued, as I kind of highlighted earlier, things like the guiding thunder would actually just negate the entire stab as it cracks space and time itself to open a subspace between the concepts of space and distance to then transport bodies of chakra through. The tetragram, as alluded to earlier, would also probably do this, but rather sealing the blade into a rock or something rather than transporting it away. Now, I could go out on a limb and begin discussing how the Rasengan and its potential to crack the Susanoo. There just isn't a way to link those two, as there's basically no way to even assert the Susanoo durability for Itachi, funnily enough, other than perhaps Kirin, which doesn't help much. So I would argue that Itachi would be out stamina'd if the Susanoo is his only trump card, and he doesn't manage to land a surprise Tsukiyomi, which, if possible, it is possible, but just due to the fact that he does look Obito in the eye quite a bit, but since we know characters like A and B have this same prone ability against Sasuke, for example, I wouldn't say that this would be the end-all, be-all, or anything like that, especially if there's a distance game being played. So, in conclusion, it's perhaps not the neck-and-neck fight that people assume it is, but it's also not the certain stomp for either side. Could Itachi ever win this? Certainly. If you want to dial the time period back, saying he actually beat a one-shot Minato if you took his massacre form probably isn't an exaggeration, but outside of that, Minato probably should win. But what do you guys think? Is Minato actually able to just destroy Itachi, or vice versa? Either way, be sure to let me know down in the comments below, as it would be greatly appreciated, along with maybe a like or a sub for your boy. I'll quit rambling. This has been a really long video for a one-on-one matchup. May God bless you all. Love you guys.